All right, so today I will be talking about research, which is one of my favorite things to do, and how we go about publishing research papers. So, what are the different steps? What are different things that you need to think about? Here's my contact information. If at the end of the session you have questions, feel free to reach out via email or social media. I will do my best to respond to you. I've been writing papers for a very long time now and have published a lot on different things, but mostly around health and machine learning and AI ethics. And I love to share what I know with other people. And I really wanted to have a community of researchers across Africa who are doing research to encourage them and help them to write research papers and publish research papers. So several years ago, I started this initiative called Rethe. It's not right, even though some people pronounce it as right. It's called Rethe. Rethe is a word from my mother's language, Oroko, and it means right. And the goal of the initiative was to provide tools and resources that students, communities across Africa would need to be successful in academia. And so we had workshops, we had mentorship opportunities, we also had opportunities to review people's manuscripts and give them feedback before they submit their papers for publication. Currently, we're thinking about how to relaunch this program in a way that's sustainable. So if you're interested in the program and want to be in touch, please do reach out. So I'm going to jump into my lecture. I'm going to talk about how we go about conducting scientific research. And in the simplest sense, you have to start with a research question. In some cases, some people start with data and then come up with a research question. But whether you're starting with data or starting without data, you do need a research question at some point. You also want to state a hypothesis. And this is, so whatever data or whatever question you're working with, you probably have some kind of knowledge based on what other people have done, based on what you've observed around you, of what you might expect your results to be. So if you're looking at the relationship between X and Y, you might have some idea of how X and Y relate to each other. And then you want to test that hypothesis and see if it holds or if it doesn't hold, giving you data. So this is a question that a lot of people ask. How do you generate a research question? I always advise people to think about what you're interested in studying. So what is that thing that keeps you up at night? What is that thing that excites you? For me, I've always tried to go in the direction of the thing that excites me the most, because it means that I spend more time working on it. I don't give up when it doesn't work out the way I want it to work. You also want to think about what impacts you, what impacts your family, what impacts your community. What are those things that you feel like you need to study so you can create change? So what would you like to change? These are all important questions for you to think about. One other thing that I think is quite important is to think also about where the field is going and what people need. So if you conduct research or you keep choosing research topics that people is not valuable to your community, is not valuable to other researchers, then the work you produce is probably not going to get cited, it's not going to get used, and that's not very useful for you. So you want to think about what are some of the hot topics within your community as well, and what are ways in which you can make substantial contributions. Another way of coming up with research questions is to think about what others are studying. So do you have ideas on how to improve the research that someone else has conducted? So maybe you read a research paper, you got really excited about it, and then you started thinking, okay, I can do this better, but how do I go about doing this better? So you can come up with research questions to improve or advance what someone else has done. You can also have a different way of looking at a problem. So maybe people are asking questions in a way that is not, you don't think is the right way to ask the question, or you think there's a more creative way to ask that question. That's another way to come up with questions. And you can also think of potential solutions. So if there is a problem and you've been thinking about a solution, you can go about investigating whether that solution can actually have an impact to that problem. So our first exercise for the day, which I encourage you to share in the chat, is what are some topics or research questions that you're exploring? What are some things that you would like to study? And I also encourage people to pay attention to what others are posting. So maybe there's someone that is interested in something similar to you. you can connect with each other and maybe collaborate on that topic. But go ahead and share your ideas in the chat. Okay, I see one from Hallelujah on poultry health. Area of machine learning confidence, that's very broad. What area of machine learning? Are there specific questions around in machine learning that you want to study? So that's another thing you need to think about. The more precise your question, the better your success, the higher the probability of you being successful in answering that question. So sometimes when I start research, I maybe have a really broad question, like I want to know how X relates to Y. For example, we have a current project which is like that. I wanted to understand how a particular policy relates to a particular health outcome in a community. And then as we started to do the analysis, I realized we needed to break that question into 2.5 final questions. So we ended up coming up with 2 new questions that are now more precise, and we can use specific methods to answer those questions. So that's another thing to think about. How precise can you make your questions? So you can start with a broad topic, but then also start thinking about what are ways in which we can make that more precise. And that could become clearer as you read about what other people have done, as you look at papers in the field. So thanks everyone for sharing ideas. Feel free to continue sharing. So now you have your research question or your topic. So what next? The next step is to investigate what has been done on the topic. So what have other people in the field done related to that topic? And maybe someone has already answered your question. That happens all the time, especially if you're working on a topic that's very exciting and a lot of people are studying that topic. And it's not the end of the world. It's not bad if someone else has already answered your question. It just means that you have to go back and think about what is the new contribution that you can make, right? What are open areas of research that maybe this particular group or person did not study? One way of identifying that is to look at limitations sections. I used to have a professor, he would just read papers that were published in the highest impact journals and then look at the limitation sections of those papers. So in most papers, especially in public health or medicine, you would have a section where we say, here are the limitations in our data, here are the limitations in our methods, here are where gaps exist in what we've done, here's where a method is not applicable. And then he would identify those limitations and then take that and do new research to contribute to that area. And in most cases, those papers also ended up being published in very high impact journals. You also want to look at future directions. So some fields maybe don't have requirements for limitations to be noted, but maybe they have a future direction section in the papers that they publish. You should look at that and see what are some of the future directions that people have described, and then you can use that to create your research question and pursue it. And in some cases, you can also reach out to people who've already done this work and see if they're interested in collaborating or supporting your idea. So this happened to me where I had a paper and I went to a conference and I met someone who had the exact same title as my paper. My paper was under review, and I went to this conference and I saw that someone else already had that specific title. And I thought maybe they already published the paper or maybe their paper already got accepted. And I was actually very discouraged. And my mentor advised me to talk to this person. And I talked to them, find out that they were actually thinking about changing the title of your paper. And they were interested in reading my paper so they could cite it and then build on what I had done because my work was more advanced than theirs. So the research community sometimes can be very collaborative. So don't hesitate to reach out to people if you want to find a collaborator, if you're interested in a specific topic that someone else has worked on, you should reach out to them and talk to them. So I'm going to go into ethical standards for research. So for you to do research that is accepted in the field, research that others in the research community will see as ethical, there's certain things that you need to think about. Authorship is one of them, and these sometimes differs from journal to journal. So some journals have very specific requirements for authorship, and In some cases that works really well, especially for junior researchers. Other times it doesn't work well for junior researchers. So it's important to think about that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Conflict of interest is another one that's important for you to identify and mention in your paper. Data sharing policies is another one. I'm not going to go too much into data sharing policies, but different journals have different policies around how to share data and what data you're expected to share when you publish your paper. Research fraud is another one, and I'll talk a little bit about research fraud. Confidentiality in peer review. This is basically the expectation that if you're reviewing someone else's paper, that you will keep that private. You will not copy the idea and go and do the research faster than them and get it published, but that you will actually respect the work that you're reviewing and keep it private and not copy. And then there's plagiarism that I think a lot of people are usually interested in. So we're going to do another exercise. And also for this exercise, you put your responses in the chat. So you're preparing a paper that involves a complex concept that you're having difficulty putting into words precisely how this concept works. You see an excellent explanation in another published paper. Is it okay to use this explanation word for word in your paper without referring to the other paper? A, yes. B, no. C, I don't know. Okay, one person already said no. Others? No. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of no's. All right, it seems like this audience has a pretty good awareness of what plagiarism is. So can we go to the next exercise? And what is the third option? The third option is I don't know, and that's a completely valid option. So the next exercise is to define plagiarism. Feel free to put your definition in the chat. What would you define plagiarism to be? And again, there are no perfect answers. Just want to make sure that everyone is participating when we're talking to each other. Usage of another person's work without reference. Okay, we got one definition. Can we get some more? Using another person's work without giving acknowledgement, copying exactly or paraphrasing other research works without citing them. Plagiarism is simply using someone else's content without proper referencing to acknowledgement of the first author. These are all really great definition of plagiarism, and I'm really excited how well the audience is aware of plagiarism because it's quite important in scientific research. So this is a definition that I extracted from a dictionary. It's a practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. So it's not just that you're not referencing or giving acknowledgement, you're actually presenting someone else's ideas and their hard work as your own. And whether you intentionally steal or unintentionally copy someone else's ideas, it is considered plagiarism. So it doesn't have to be intentional, which is why you have to be very careful. Plagiarism is an ethical issue and can have severe consequences in academia. So what are some of the consequences you think you might experience if you plagiarize someone else's work and publish it? Rejection by peer reviewers. Yeah, that would be probably a very good thing. Like if someone was to notice that you plagiarized and rejected your paper, then that would be a good thing. But sometimes it doesn't get identified during the peer review process because people are not always copying and posting things to Google to see whether they were plagiarized. You can be sued for damages, 14 years imprisonment. Is that true? Is that for a particular country? There are lawsuits, yeah. Rejection by publishers, yeah, that can happen as well. academic penalties, damage to reputation, legal repercussions, a loss of trust and one's integrity. These are all valid points. Someone says arrested. So yeah, these are all very valid points and mirror what I put on my slides. So you can destroy your reputation, your academic, your professional reputation. It can affect the reputation of your school and institution as well. It can lead to legal problems, so you can be sued in some cases. You can have financial costs. So there are funding organizations that would ask you to give back their money if they funded your research. It can affect the lives of others. So if you plagiarize in a way that doesn't that is untrue, that creates data or information that is not completely credible, it can affect other people's lives, but then you're also taking from other people and that affects them too negatively. So here are 3 actions to take to avoid plagiarism. 1, if you decide to cite a paper in your manuscript, try to read and understand the paper. So this can be challenging, especially when you're coming into a topic and you don't really know all the jargon in the field, but it's better for you to take the time, whether it's weeks or months, to understand the material that you're trying to cite before you cite it, instead of rushing and citing a paper and then being accused of plagiarism. Do not copy and paste text from someone else's work into your manuscript, because sometimes people do this and they think, okay, I'm going to delete this later. I just want to put it in my manuscript. I'll paraphrase it and then delete it, but then they forget to delete it. And that text stays in your manuscript and it gets published, then it becomes a problem. Always check your work against the sources you cite. This one is easy. So if you've tried to paraphrase something, go back and look at the original text. Did you actually paraphrase it? Did you just copy it? And if you copy it, put quotes around it. Like, it's not a bad thing to copy if you can put quotes around it and reference the original source so that someone knows it's someone else's words, it's not your words. There are lots of other things that you can do and lots of other actions that happen that are related to plagiarism in scientific work. So one is just copying and pasting things, which is not okay. What you should do instead is keep track of sources you use while researching and where you use them in your paper. Always fully acknowledge and cite the sources. And as I mentioned, use quotation marks around word for word text. Some people do very substantial copying, so they might copy research materials, processes, tables, or equipment. And this can also happen for your own work. Like, you've published a paper, you're trying to write another paper, and you use the same methods. You cannot just copy and paste from your previous paper. You have to cite from that previous paper, or you have to paraphrase it and then cite it. There's paraphrasing, which is always a good thing, but you still have to cite the original author. There's also text recycling. This usually applies to our own work, as I mentioned, and you want to make sure that you quote yourself, even if you were the one that wrote in the original source, either quote yourself or paraphrase when you rewrite that text. So let's move to authorship. Several different journals or communities for different fields will have specific expectations about authorship. This is just one example. This doesn't apply to all the different journals. And they might ask that for you to list someone as an author, they have to have contributed substantially to the work, whether it's through data acquisition, data processing, analysis, or interpretation. They should have contributed to drafting the manuscript, final approval of the manuscript. And sometimes they might have several other conditions, and they might ask you to choose maybe 2 or 3 of those conditions for someone to be eligible for authorship. I tend to err on the side of thinking about how to include people in authorship rather than how to exclude people from authorship. So if you have maybe junior researchers on your field who are much junior than you, then you want to think about ways that you can encourage them to contribute to a manuscript enough such that they can be authors, whether it's through data acquisition and processing, but also have them be part of the writing team so they learn how to write manuscripts, and they can also see what the process looks like for publishing manuscripts. And that's also a way of passing down the knowledge that you have. Conflict of interest is usually defined as any financial or non-financial considerations or opportunities that you have, or things that you own that have the potential to bias your research judgment, your professional research judgment. And the bias could be conscious or unconscious. And conflict of interest might give the perception of bias, even if it does not exist. So it's always important to disclose. So there's several different types of conflict of interest. Financially, it could be around funding. So if you're getting funding from, let's say you get funding from a Coke company or the Coke industry to study how Coca-Cola improves people's health. That is a conflict of interest because it benefits the company. So when you do write a paper, you need to state that you're getting money from that particular industry to do this research. It could also be around maybe you own stocks in a particular company and you're doing research that could benefit that company. Or your research just in general, maybe a company sponsored you to go to a conference, or sponsored your research in other ways, or your career in other ways. When you do write a paper, if the paper can benefit that company in any way, you should discuss conflicts of interest. So next exercise, can you share in the chat some examples of potential conflicts of interest that you can think of or that you've seen in different scenarios? Any examples?
Hello, Elaine.
Yes.
So I believe our participants are trying to put down their examples. So it might be coming in as you go on in the session, right? So
Okay.
just wait. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I'll just go on to the next one, and feel free to put your examples in the chat. We're also going to have a few minutes for questions later on. Another important area is research fraud. And research fraud happens in two major ways. One is fabrication. So that's report of fake data or results. And then the second one is falsification. So people manipulate data, research processes, and materials to make their research look or lead to a particular conclusion. So this is a recent example, and it doesn't matter how important you are. If the research community either suspects you of research fraud or actually investigates and finds that you've committed research fraud, it can affect your career significantly. So this is recent news from Stanford University that most of you probably know about, one of the top universities in the US. The president had to resign because of questions about his research integrity. There have also been other examples over the years. This one was a very high-profile Australian scientist who admitted to fabricating data in a major trial of research fraud, and the papers were drawn back from publication. They resigned their research position. It also affected their reputation, and that record is on the internet now forever. Anyone can find it. There's another example where an institution had to pay money back to the US government because of research fraud. So when they receive funding, one of the things that you're basically agreeing to is that your research is going to be ethical. So when your research becomes unethical, like in this particular case, researchers fabricated data and images that they used in grant applications and other scientific documents, and the institutions had to pay money back to the funders. So those are just some examples of things that you need to think about when you think about ethics. I have a lot of exercises. I don't know if we're going to go through all of them, but we're going to go through some at least. So the first one is, you've worked in a study And the study has one major finding, that it is possible to split it into multiple studies and publish it as several different papers in multiple conferences. Is this ethical? Yes or no? You can answer and explain your response in the chat. Yes, I see a lot of yeses. Can you explain why you think it's yes? I see one no. Can you explain why you think it's a no? Okay. So one response says you can receive reviews as you go along. Another one says it's okay as long as you remain credible and avoid any form of plagiarism. The no explanations, you should stick to the main topic and handle others as sequels. No, that is salami publication. That's actually quite a good point. That's what some researchers refer to as salami publication. It basically means that like you've done the research, but there's only one major finding. It's not that you have 5 different findings, you have one major finding. When you start splitting it in terms of penalization, like you might not get penalized in any way, but others in the research community look at that unfavorably because you only have one major finding. It doesn't make sense to have multiple papers written when you only have one finding. All right, moving on to the next question. So you're working on a paper, but your results are not as good as the results of the previous study. You're using the same data and methods. What should you do? First, A, copy the results from the other study. B, state that the study cannot be reproduced. C, contact the authors of the other study. B, okay. So I see B and C. C and then B. Yeah, these are all valid responses. You can state that the study cannot be reproduced, which happens a lot. Someone says A and C. A is something you do not want to do. You do not want to copy the results from the other study. You can state that the study cannot be reproduced, and you can contact the authors of the study to see if there are ways that they can explain why their study is not reproducible. All right, next exercise. So you've written a paper in English and submitted it to a journal for publication. Journal reviews and accepts your paper. Is it ethical to submit the same paper in French to another journal? It would definitely lengthen your resume or your CV. No, I see a lot of no's to this. Yeah, these are all good points. If you can add an explanation, I think that helps. Oh, a previous question. What's the answer? So for the previous question, the answer is either B or C, or both. Okay, so a lot of people say no to this question. If anyone thinks yes, please do share why you think yes. So there is one yes, if you want to make it accessible to French-speaking countries. That's actually a good point. That could be a case where you do need to rewrite the paper in French and publish it in a French journal. So one thing that I really want to point out is that ethical issues are not always, black and white. They're not always so clear. And you have to think exactly why something is yes or no. It's not just, there's not always a clear yes and a clear no. So next exercise, you have been working hard on the paper, but you're not getting the results you expected. The accuracy of your method is 88.7%, but you were hoping for 90%. Is it ethical to report 90%? Yes or no? No? I see one no in the chat. Okay, I think this is a case where the answer is very clearly no. Because this is unethical, this is research fabrication and research fraud. Yeah, that's a very good point. If you do report that your answer, you report no, 90% when you're actually getting 88.7%, at some point that will catch up to you. Next question. You've been working on the paper with several colleagues at DSN. Your best friend who is not working on the paper is applying to graduate school and needs something to strengthen their resume. Is it okay to add them as an author to the paper? Yes or no? And what are your justifications? I see no's. Why? Why is it not okay to add them to the paper? One says yes, we rise by lifting others. Someone says no, sorry, friend. No, they didn't make a contribution. No, they're not part of it and can't defend it. If asked. No, didn't work on it. Tell the friend what they need to do is to be added as author. Yeah, these are all valid points. Like the answer could be no, they didn't contribute to it. Yes, if there are opportunities for them to contribute to the paper, if there are specific things that they can do that will qualify them for authorship, that's something that you can give them an option to do. I've had papers where when we initially wrote the paper, we didn't have certain people included as authors in the paper, but then the paper came back from review and we've been asked questions that we needed people with specific type of expertise to answer those questions. Mm-hmm. So then we invited those people to become authors on the paper so they can help us answer the questions that we needed to answer during the review process. So the answer can be yes or no, depending on how you think about it. So this is what ethics is. You have to think about your reasoning behind your answer. So number 6, a company your wife works for recently created a new mango beverage. They would like you as a researcher to study the benefits of the beverage. Is this considered a conflict of interest? Yes or no? And please explain why. All right, one person says yes, you'll be biased and want to give positive results. It's hard to say. It depends on the company's policy about engaging staff family. Another person says yes because it will benefit the company. It's not conflict of interest because your job is quite spelled out. So the answer is actually yes, it is conflict of interest because of your relationship with one of your staff. And conflict of interest is not a bad thing in itself as long as it's disclosed, because it might or might not affect your conclusion. So maybe you end up doing the research and the research is very rigorous and you actually find that the beverage does not have any health benefits and you publish that. So in that sense, it doesn't benefit the company, but it's still a conflict of interest because your wife works at the company and you have to state that. Either way, whether you choose to do the work, whether you choose to accept the money for the research, you have to be clear about the fact that you were doing this work and acknowledge that this is a potential conflict of interest. All right, moving on to the next question. You're reviewing a paper for Black in AI. the research is interesting and you think you can do it better. Is it okay to copy the idea and research it? Yes or no? Yes, yes. Someone says it's okay. So I see a few people who say, yes, it's okay to copy the idea and research it. Someone says yes, as long as you acknowledge the original source. Someone says big no. If you want to do that, you need to ask the author. I see another no. I see a yes, as long as you state the original work and define the difference. Yes, with permission. The answer is no. When you agree to review a paper, you're basically agreeing that you will not copy the ideas in the papers that you review. So whether you're reviewing research for a conference, you're reviewing for a journal, or you're reviewing for grants applications, you cannot copy the ideas that are presented in that. You can maybe later on, after the work has been completed or has been published, if you want to collaborate with those people, you can reach out to them. If you want to cite their work, if you want to build on the work, but you cannot take their idea and go do it faster than they do it and get it published, because that is basically stealing from someone else. And in a lot of cases, ideas, like a paper that is submitted is not yet public. So it's not something that you can say, I cited the paper, because it's not public, it's not being published. The idea is still being developed. And so you cannot say, oh, I took the idea and then I cited it. You have to wait until the paper is published before you can cite it. And, if you want to collaborate with those people, reach out to them. But it is unethical for you to take that idea, to copy the idea and research it. So next question, which of these would be considered a conflict of interest? A, you run a company that would benefit from your research. B, you're asked to review a manuscript submitted by someone you work with. C, your spouse is working for the company commissioning the research. And D, all of the above. All right, I see all in the chat. All. B, all of the above. So yeah, that's the correct answer, is all of the above. All of these will be considered conflict of interest. And again, as I said before, the main thing is that you openly state these conflicts of interest, because if you hide them later on, you will be questioned about it, and you might lose credibility if you do research from either of one of the scenarios where someone close to you or yourself might benefit from the research. Our next exercise, you've been unable to finish an analysis before the conference submission deadline. You have an idea what the results should be and plan to finish the analysis before the conference. What should you do? Submit the paper with the incomplete analysis. Submit the paper with a complete set of analysis based on what you plan to do. Do not submit the paper. A, submit the paper with the incomplete analysis. I see someone says do not submit. A or C? C. Okay. Yeah. So the answer in this case is A or C. So it's up to you whether you want to submit the paper with the incomplete analysis or not submit the paper, but it's unethical for you to fake the analysis and then submit it. And you can also ask for an extension if you need one. So that's also a good point. All right, I think this is the last exercise. So you're writing a paper using the same methods you used in the previous paper. Can you copy and paste the method's description from the other paper word for word? Yes or no? All right, I see all the responses coming on the chat say no. So yeah, that's the correct answer. You do not want to copy word for word. You can paraphrase and cite the original source, which is actually quite good for you. You get extra citations. All right, we're gonna have 15 minutes for questions, but I don't think we have that. So we're gonna move on, and then later on we can have time for questions. So let's go to how to write and publish a scientific paper. Just to go through, I'm just gonna give you some background around writing in general, and then go into scientific papers more specifically. I might skip some slides, and I think you will have access to the slides later on, or reach out to me if there's specific things you want to learn about. So good writing is important, whether you're writing for research or you're writing for other purposes. You want to learn how to write well. You want to learn how to communicate well. If you write research papers that people understand, they will cite those papers. If you write research papers that people don't understand, they will not cite those papers, even if your idea is a great idea. So you want to think about, how do you write papers that communicate your ideas in a way that other people can understand and either replicate or use to advance science. Write regularly, as regularly as possible. For me, I write almost every day. Sometimes it's research, sometimes it's creative writing, sometimes it's just, jotting down ideas on a piece of paper. But just writing helps you to think through things. You don't have to wait till your project is complete to write. You can write while you're still doing research. It helps you clarify your ideas. It helps you see areas where there are gaps that you need to fill. And also aim to improve your writing. Don't just write and write the same all the time. When you write, ask yourself questions. Can this sentence be better? Can I clarify this word? Is this word a jargon that most people would understand? Can I use another word? Can I use another phrase? Don't write alone. If it's possible, find peers and mentors who can help you write well. And this is what I was really trying to do with Rethet, to have a community of people, specifically Africans, who are writing together and contributing to science. So what is scientific writing? Scientific writing comes in many different forms, but is mainly used to communicate ideas and findings to others in the scientific community. It can be your lab notebook, your project report, your class paper, your academic journal article, a blog post, a scientific magazine article. A lot of my writing has been around academic journal articles, but I've also kept blogs at different points in my career. I've also published scientific magazine articles, because sometimes you need to write in different ways to communicate to different people. So when you write for academic journals, you're usually communicating to people within the field or people who are in the sciences. When I write for a scientific magazine article, usually I'm trying to communicate to everyday people who are not scientists, people who might want to learn about something new, but they're not into reading a journal article. And also sometimes I want to communicate to a policymaker who might read a news article, who's more likely to read a news article than they are to go find an academic journal paper which might be really boring to them. So these are all things you need to think about as you write. These are typical elements of a scientific paper. So usually the author list is the first thing you see. You have author information, and this can include your addresses, your contact information. Sorry, the title is the first thing you see, and then you have the author list, and then you have author information, and then you have your abstract, introduction. In some cases, you have introduction and then results, and then you have your materials and methods. In other cases, you have introduction, materials, methods, results, and then discussion. And then for some journals or conferences, you might have an acknowledgement section, and this is where you get to thank all the people who might have contributed to this research, but did not contribute enough to be included in the author list. Or maybe they help you think about your ideas, but did not contribute to the actual paper. And then you have your literature cited, you have tables and illustrations. Tables and illustrations are things that you also need to think about because they're important for you when you communicate the results. So how do you create tables that summarize your research in a way for people to understand? Or how do you visualize your data or create illustrations in a way that communicate the major findings of your research? Those are all things to think about, a lot to think about. Other things that you need to consider are the right journal. So for some excuse me, for some journal families, you might be able to enter your abstract into a box. So there's some journals that have like a website where you can put in your abstract, and then it will tell you the right journal that maybe fits your abstract. You also want to think about journal requirements. Another way of finding a journal is to also look at where people in your field are publishing. Or if you want to find the right conference, look at where other people in your field are publishing, and then try to target the same journals or conferences. And then you also have requirements, whether it's journals or conference requirements. These are things to pay attention to, because you don't want to do all the hard work of writing a paper, submitting it, and then it's rejected just because you did not meet the requirements. And then there's a whole submission process that differs for different journals or conferences. And then there's a review process. The review process can be lengthy or can be really short, depending on both the journal, but also the paper and the reviewers. The review process can be quite subjective because it's being done by humans. And so humans are going to review and give you input based on what they know about the field. But sometimes people are having a bad day and they write reviews that make no sense. And you have to respond in a way that is professional. You can't just, curse people out for giving you a bad review. You have to read through the reviews and then respond to them. And this can take, weeks. This can take months. For some fields, this can take years. So it's important for you to pay attention to the review process. Look at some journals or conferences will post what that looks like and how long it takes. I'm not going to go through this. This is just grammar review. I think a lot of you can do this on your own. I want to mention how to write sentences because I think this is important. When you write, you want to write a complete sentence. So a complete sentence is a sentence that expresses a complete thought. It contains both the subject and the predicate. So I've seen a lot of where people write fragments, and fragments basically mean that your thought is not complete. You started thinking about something, but you didn't finish it. So the first example will be a fragment. So this is basically Nsoesie all over the table. And in this case, it lacks a verb. A complete sentence would be Nsoesie flew all over the table, or Nsoesie fell all over the table, or the Nsoesie fell all over the table. Another thing to think about is run-on sentences. And run-on sentences just means that your thought just keeps going. It doesn't seem to have a clear stop point. So an example would be, I thought the ride would never end. My eyes were crossed and my fingers were numb. You can split this into two sentences. You can add more punctuation. So the corrected example in this case is, I thought the ride would never end. Full stop. My eyes were crossed and my fingers were numb. And there are very special cases where fragments are useful, but this is usually more around like journalistic writing when you're writing for a newspaper or for a scientific magazine. But in academic journals or for academic conferences, you have to write complete sentences. Other things to consider when writing sentences is you want to think about where to put each of the building blocks in your sentence. So you have words, you have clauses, you have phrases. Where is your action? So if you have a particular action happening in your sentence, you want to put that towards the front, not towards the back. And we're going to look at some examples. Checking time. Okay. Sentence length is also another important one. If your sentences are too long, it can get really exhausting for people who are reading it, or someone might be reading it, they understand the first part and they don't understand the second part. You want to cut out unnecessary words in your sentences. And this is where, when I said that you want to think about how to improve your writing, when you write the first time is usually not the best, right? You want to go back and edit maybe 2 or 3 times before you get to the point where you want to submit it somewhere else. Sometimes I edit the same things 3, 4, 5 times before I send them out. You want to use a sentence length that allows you to communicate clearly. So this is kind of subjective, but basically if you've written a sentence and you find that you're reading that sentence and you have more than 20 or 25 words and it just keeps going, think about how to break that into shorter sentences. This is always a good thing. So these are some examples. The first one says, at the present time, we're conducting new experiments. This sentence could be shorter by just saying, currently, we're conducting new experiments. And sometimes you don't even need the currently. You can just say we're conducting new experiments. It has exact same meaning. Another example is existing research suggests A is better than B. You can just say research suggests A is better than B. So we're gonna have another exercise. So this time we're going to try to combine these sentences. So we want to write about a tornado that struck a small town without warning. And we have all of the different sentences describing the same tornado. Can you take an attempt to combine the sentences? Feel free to put your responses in the chat. I see some responses coming in. There was a tornado that struck a small town without warning. That's a good response, but it's incomplete because we missed a lot of the other information we have about injuries and deaths. It's another response. The tornado struck a small town without warning, causing a great deal of damage, including a number of serious injuries and deaths. That's a good response. I would change the semicolon there. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide. The tornado struck the small town without warning, causing a great deal of damages, several injuries and deaths. Okay, that's also a good one. A tornado struck a small town without warning and caused a great deal of damage and a number of serious injuries. That's a good one, but that misses out on the deaths, which are different from serious injuries. So here are a few examples for you to consider. The first one is what several people have put in the chat. It uses a series to combine 3 or more similar ideas. So the tornado struck a small town without warning, causing extensive damage, numerous injuries, and several deaths. In the second case, we use a semicolon to combine the sentences, and we also added therefore. The tornado struck the town without warning, therefore it caused extensive damage, numerous injuries, and several deaths. And then in the last case, we use a relative pronoun. In this case, we say the tornado, which was completely unexpected, swept through the small town, causing extensive damage, numerous injuries, and deaths. I think a lot of the examples that are being put in the chat are pretty good. The main thing is make sure that you capture all the information that's presented. All right, we're gonna skip this, and we're gonna go into breaking sentences. So can you break this sentence into 2 or more sentences? All right, we'll have one more minute and then we'll move on. I think we have less than 30 minutes left in this session, and I want to get to the parts of the paper. The speaker, though he paid, okay, some answers are coming in the chat. The speaker, though he paid 15,000 to attend the conference, probably felt that the egg on his face was not worth it, full stop. And then you have the second part of the sentence. The speaker felt that the egg on his face was not worth it after paying 15K to attend the given conference. Okay, these are all quite good examples. And a major place where you can think about the split is where you have the and some people, like I think the first example basically did this and just split it into two different sentences. So there are a lot more examples here that we're not going to go through over today because we're basically trying to cover a whole workshop worth of materials in 1.5 hours. So let me get you to actually write in your scientific paper. All right, so this is a scientific paper writing section. So we're going to go through the different parts of the paper and some of the things you need to think about when you're writing a paper. So sometimes there are differences in language and the paper structure, organization by field, by journal, by conference. These are all things that you need to pay attention to. So one thing that I encourage you to do is read in the area that you're interested in publishing in. And one thing that I always do if I'm publishing in a journal for the first time, I will read papers that have been published in that journal. Sometimes I don't read them in detail, but I just want to see what is the language like, what is the structure of the paper, how do people put different things together, so then I can organize my paper in a similar way. Writing scientific papers requires reading in your field. It requires critical thinking, and it's hard work, but I think it's also work that benefits you, but also benefits the scientific community. So critical thinking is the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that throughout this. So you want to question what you read and do. So when you're reading a scientific paper, you want to ask questions about the assumptions that the authors are making. Don't always assume that what is presented to you is fact and it's unchangeable, because sometimes authors make assumptions that affect the results that you observe in a paper. And if you change those assumptions, then you will get different results. So it's important to understand what the assumptions are. So you also want to understand if the data is representative of the population that is being studied. So this is where we think about equity and representation. So who is included, who is excluded, are the results generalizable? And data sets are not going to be completely or 100% unbiased. Every single data set is biased, but it's important for you to understand those biases. So when you write about a particular data set or you're reading about a particular data set, you need to understand where it's applicable and where it's not applicable. Because when we do research and claim that it applies to everyone and it doesn't, it means that it furthers bias, it furthers inequities, especially when we're studying particular problems or have particular either social questions that affect people directly. You also want to question your methods. Are the methods unbiased, whether they're yours or someone else's? Are there other ways of approaching the question or the problem? And what could happen if the tool that you're developing or someone else is developing was deployed? Who would be affected? Would it be affected positively or negatively, etc.? So these are all critical questions to think about when you're conducting research or when you're reading other people's research. One important aspect of your paper is a literature review. As I mentioned before, it's very important for you to define your topic clearly or your question clearly, because that will help you or increase your chances of answering that question. If your question is too broad, then you're just going to get confused and get lost. And sometimes you can ask a broad question and then start reading about that question. And in the process, you can redefine your question such that it is much more clearly stated. There are many platforms that you can use for literature review. PubMed is one that's widely used. Google Scholar is another one. But there are also platforms and databases that are specific to African researchers and publications. You want to search and research during your literature review, and this basically means that papers get published while you're doing your literature review, or sometimes the search terms you enter are not as precise as needed, and so you need to go back and research after your initial search. You want to take notes while reading, so you're not going back and reading the same papers over and over again because you forgot what you read the first time. So make notes when you're reading a paper that summarizes what you've read. Keep the review focused. Again, this goes back to you starting with a very clear topic, and be critical and consistent. Like, don't be afraid of noting issues in other people's work, because that can inspire you to do better work. So pay attention to areas where there might be bias, or there might be gaps, or there are assumptions that don't make sense, both in your work, but also in other people's work. So let's go into writing the introduction. So the purpose of the introduction should be to supply sufficient background information to allow the reader to understand and evaluate the results of the present study without needing to refer to previous publications. So when you write your introduction, you want your reader to know what exactly has been done in the field. Why is this question important relative to what has been done in the field? You also want them to know what is the specific questions that you're trying to answer. So the introduction should provide the rationale for the present study. You should state briefly and clearly your purpose in writing the paper. Why should people care about your paper? Why is this paper important? So some simple rules to think about when you're working on an introduction. So clearly state the problem to be investigated. What I do is I usually use questions and I enumerate. So I would say the first question, number one, is this. The second question is this. The third question is this. And then when I write my method section, I also link back to those questions. So I would say to answer the specific question, yes, what we did. And then in the results section as well, also try to link back. So there's consistency when someone is reading through your paper, like, okay, this are the questions that they asked. Yes, how they try to answer they try to answer those questions using these different methods, and here are the results that they found. You also want to review pertinent literature to orient the reader. So you want the reader to understand what has been done in the field, especially if they're not an expert in the field. They should know what has been done and why your question is important. State the major contribution of the paper and how it differs from previously published studies. So in some cases, you're working on a paper, you find a paper that may be quite similar to your idea. Don't just ignore it and pretend that it doesn't exist. It's going to come up during review, especially people reviewing your paper have expertise in that area. So it's best for you to acknowledge that paper and then explain why you are doing this study and why your study is different from the other study. State the major results. So this depends on the journal, or the conference. Most of the journals I publish in do not require you to state major results. So this is just an example of a paper that we wrote that used deep learning to examine the association of the built environment with prevalence of neighborhood adult obesity in cities in the US. So this is the first paragraph of the study. And the first thing that we did was state the problem globally. So we're saying obesity is a problem everywhere in the world. And here are the statistics for that. And then in the second sentence, we say, here's a problem specifically in the US. And that's one way of doing this. And that's the way that a lot of people do this. Like, you start with a big view and then you narrow down to specifics. And then in the third sentence, we talk about how obesity is a complex health issue that has been linked to many different factors. We state those factors. And then we go to behavioral traits. And then we talk about beyond behavioral traits, what are some of the other factors that impact obesity prevalence in different communities? So in this, by the time we get to that last sentence, we're setting the stage for our research. So then we go to the next sentence. So one thing that I want you to note is that there is a link between those different paragraphs, since I didn't talk about paragraphs. And that's something that you want to pay attention to. Your paragraphs shouldn't just stand by themselves. So you shouldn't have one paragraph that exists and then you have another paragraph that have no connection to each other. You want your paragraphs to link to each other. So in this particular paragraph, we intentionally end the paragraph by talking about the built environment, and then start the next paragraph by talking about the built environment. So now we're getting deeper into the built environment. What are some of the studies that have been done to understand how the built environment impacts obesity and physical activity? And we reviewed a bunch of studies. As you can see, we're citing from 8 to 26. So there was a lot of papers. And one thing that really helped for this particular study is we looked at review papers. So if you can find review papers in your field that have condensed the literature into one paper, that's something that's helpful. But this is a field that is very broad and research hasn't gone on for a very long time. So there's a lot of publication in this space. So we had to read a lot of papers and cite a lot of papers to convey to our reviewers that we know what we're talking about. And so then we go into specific factors that have been studied. And then in the third paragraph, we said, even though this is a really broad field and people have done a lot of work, there is some inconsistency in how the work is being done. And this inconsistency exists across studies and geographic contexts. And that's where we are coming in to provide solutions. So we're thinking about ways in which AI can be used to create more consistent measures so that it allows for comparison across different regions. And then in the last paragraph, we get more specific about our methods. We're saying, yeah, we propose to do the specific study, here are the methods that we're using. And then we acknowledge this other study that was published by one of my colleagues right before our study came out. And we realized they used similar methods, but the way they designed their study and the data sets that they used was slightly different. And so we were able to say, yes, what they did, and yes, how it's different from ours. And that's quite important. And then lastly, we talk about the advantage of the approach before we go into the methods. Okay, I'm gonna jump into the methods since we're running out of time. So writing the methods and materials section. So the purpose of the materials and methods section is to provide enough detail that a competent worker can repeat the experiments. So basically, you want to describe your methods in a way that someone can replicate it. So your goal when you write is not to impress people. Your goal is to communicate to people. So you want people to understand whatever it is you've done. If you can avoid...
Hello, Elaine.
Yes, Nsoesie.
Yeah, thank you very much for the session so far. Just wanted to let you know that we have about 10 more minutes to the end of the session. Yeah.
Yep. That's what I was noting. Oh, thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
All right. So you want to write in a way that is easy for your methods to be replicated. So you want to include exact technical details, including quantities, units of measurements. If you are doing experiments with organisms, you want to state those. If you have human subjects, you want to clearly describe how you went through collecting data, what informed consent looks like, what ethical procedures you carried out. So for your methods, when you write your methods, you want to present them chronologically. So you want to say, I did 1, and then I did 2, and then I did 3, so that someone else can follow. And that's not usually what always happens when you do your methods. Sometimes, you do an analysis, and then you have to go back and redo that analysis. You don't need to describe all of that figuring out process. You describe what your final process was. So when you finally figure out how this analysis needed to be done, how did you do it? Use subheadings because that helps breaks down information and it helps people follow exactly what's happening in different sections of your manuscript. Be precise, state things exactly as they are. If you have measurements, if you have dates, state exact dates when you collected the data. State your method of investigation and reason for selecting that method if necessary. So if you're using a method that is well known in your field, you don't need to justify it. But if you're using a method that is new, you want to justify why that happened. You don't need to overstate ordinary statistical methods, add references, add additional details for advanced or unusual methods. This is another example, just to go through this really fast. So in the first paragraph, we basically describe our method. And we state exactly when we talk about a website where we got the data from. And then we also talk about when the dates on which the data was provided. This is not the date when we collect the data, but the date during which the reviews were provided on this website. And then we give specific numbers like 29 colleges and the number of businesses. And then in our next section, we talk about analysis. We talk about what we did first. And then we talk about what we did next, which was classification. And then we did a bias and cluster analysis. That was our third step. Again, like I mentioned, when you're doing this type of analysis, sometimes you have to do things and then go back and change things. And you don't have to describe all of that. You can just describe what you did first, what you did next, and so forth, so that someone else can replicate that. So writing the results, you want to state your findings clearly and succinctly. So you want people to understand exactly what you found. You don't have to state your methods and your results. This happens a lot with my trainees. So you have to, when you've already written something in your method section, you don't have to repeat it in your results. Your results is for your results. Results can be really short. Choose what you present. So create summaries. If you've done something like 100 times, what is a way to summarize it so that your audience can understand? Simple rules, look at journal guidelines. Do not repeat information that you've already presented in tables or figures. Try to keep your results short and sweet, so be precise. Use statistics to create summaries. Remember that your whole paper stands or falls on the basis of your results. So if your results are not clearly stated, your paper is not going to have the contribution you want it to have. So think clearly about what you want to present in the results. What are your major findings, and communicate those. So lastly is the discussion. So the discussion is usually the hardest section to write because it's not always clearly defined. And sometimes in some journals, you combine the results and the discussion. And discussion sometimes is too long, covers too many things that are needed to be covered. But what you really want to make sure gets into your results is the significance of your work. So you want to state what you have found. After doing all of this analysis, spending months or maybe even years doing research, what did you find? Discuss your findings. Do not reiterate the results. So just say, these are my major findings, and here's why they're important. Point out exceptions in your findings. So if your findings agree or disagree with other people's findings, talk about that. If there are things that you've discovered that other people have not discovered, talk about that as well. Clearly state your conclusions and provide evidence to support each conclusion. That's quite important. So don't present conclusions that are beyond the work that you have done. Try to make sure that your conclusions actually align with your findings. So here's an example of a results section where we started with our findings demonstrate that combining reverse dynamic methodology and subject matter expertise search activity more accurately predicts influenza activity than the well-established internet-based tool Google Flu Trends. So we're saying, yes, why our findings are important. And then when we go into specifically, we talk about all the different aspects of our study. So we help the reader understand more about why our findings are important. And then in the next paragraph, we go in and we talk even a lot more about this and what has been done and how our findings relate to other people's findings. And one important thing for my field, public health, we always encourage to talk about limitations. Limitations are not a bad thing. They help other people understand where they can apply your work and where your work cannot be applied. So we went in and we talked about our limitations and stated what those limitations were. And then finally, we talk about conclusions. So as I mentioned before, your conclusions should align with your findings. They shouldn't be something else that you just make up. They should be aligned with your findings. So finally, I just want to mention the abstract. So most people prefer to write the abstract after the paper is complete. The abstract should describe the main objective of the study, explain why the study was done, including any major organisms used, briefly state the methods without including too much detail, summarize the most important results and their significance. So I think about the abstract like a mini paper, because you want to say, yes, what I wanted to accomplish with this study are my major objectives. And then you say, yes, what we done, well, yes, what we did, yeah, the methods that we use, and then yeah, our results and their significance. So that's mainly what I wanted to cover today. I know I went through a lot really fast. And so if you're on social media and there are things that you want to learn more about, I'm happy to share those. I don't know when we're going to have other sessions for right there. But if you have specific questions and you want me to cover them in some form, I'm happy to share those. And again, yes, my contact information. I think we have like 5 minutes to take questions.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Elaine. Thank you so much for the amazing session. I believe everyone on the call, right, all of the participants, I mean, had a really insightful time. So guys, can you please, first of all, show some appreciation with the clap emojis and the fire emojis. I mean, for personally, I myself, I've gotten a lot more insights on research writing that I believe can be extremely valuable for me in my career. Thank you very much, Professor Elaine. So guys, I don't know if you have any other question, any question for Professor before she takes her lead. She has, I mean, provided amazing top-level insights that can really help every one of us. So if you do have any questions, can you please drop them now? And we can just take 1 or 2 questions. Of course, like she mentioned, you can reach out to her, right? Her Twitter and Instagram handle is right there. So she's very much open to entertaining your question if you do have any after this session. Yeah. Okay, so in the absence of any, Professor, we just want to say a very big thank you. Thank you for your time on the call, and thank you for the insights that you've shared with the participants here today. Okay, Professor, there's just a few questions, and I think they're coming in quite late, but let's quickly take them. Yeah. So Chibuike said, when writing a report, can you still paraphrase someone's blog on research and still reference them?
Yes, you can do that. As long as someone else has provided this information publicly, you can definitely paraphrase and cite them. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I believe that it's clear. Wasu said, which is better? Should a PhD research report be big with a lot of pages, or should it be small? That's talking about the now. Yeah.
Is this
yeah? So
is this a dissertation, or is it like, what is a PhD research report?
Okay, so Wasu, you want to provide a little bit more context to that, which might help the answer. So let's go to the next question. Success said, if I'm to cite a particular comment and the journal from where I got it cited, okay, from the journal from where I got it cited, and the original journal is too old, should I still go ahead to cite it? I think that's the question.
Yes, you should. And sometimes you have a citation within another paper, so you should cite both the paper where you found the citation and the original citation. So.
Okay. I think that helps success. Okay. Then just 2 more and then we can call it a day. Some conferences require 2 pages, some 4 pages, and some a whole lot more. So how do we write to meet this requirement? This from one of our students. Yeah.
I would say start by writing everything that you need to write, and then you can cut it down to the number of pages that is being required. So sometimes, what you need to write might actually be 10 pages. And then when you want to submit to a conference, you just want to highlight what are the most important parts of what you're writing, and you can put that in 2 pages or 4 pages.
Okay, all right. Okay, so this question is quite very strong. He said, yeah, I think it will really benefit everyone. He said, if you do a research individually without being in an organization, how can you publish your research?
You can actually publish research without being in an organization. I think that you follow the same process, but the only difference is that you're either doing the research by yourself or you're collaborating with other people, but it's basically the same process. I think the issue is around cost, because a lot of people will do research in organizations, are either getting paid or they're students in those organizations. So you would have to take the cost in terms of time or any financial cost that's required for you to do that research. But otherwise, the process would be quite similar.
Okay. Then just 1 more and then we're done. Oluwafem said, usually picking a research topic can be a great task. So how often will you recommend one picks a topic that has been treated before in the quest of recommending other solutions?
I think this goes back to what your interests are. So if your interest is in a particular topic that has already been studied, I still encourage you to pursue that topic. And maybe you can ask, think of different questions that you can ask to follow the field, or different ways or different solutions that you can provide to that particular problem or question.
Okay. And so just one more, this from one of our students. Again, I think it's really helped. He said, how do I publish my undergraduate research as a paper? Yeah, she's an undergraduate. How does she publish it as a paper?
You follow the same process. So you find the journal that you want to publish in, look at the journal guidelines, and then format your paper based on the journal guidelines. You might need some help. I don't know how long your research report is for your undergraduate, but you might need some help, getting that to a smaller size. So if it's 10 pages and the journal is only asking for a few pages, then you might need some help to get it down to a smaller size. But otherwise, it's basically the same process because you go through the same research process.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you so much for all of those answers. And I believe for all of our participants who have asked those questions, and even those who haven't asked, I believe they found the answers quite insightful. Once again, I want to say a very big thank you to you, Prof, for your time on the call and for the insights that you shared with us. I believe that these conversations will really spark new endeavors from participants as they advance in their career. Thank you once again for your time, and Prof, do have an amazing day ahead.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. Thank you. So in a moment from now, guys, I will be calling my colleague to come for a quick voting, right? I believe quite a number of us were on the call yesterday when our CEO and lead mentor, Olubayade Kombi, spoke about the Mr. and Mr. algorithm. So in a moment from now, we want to quickly, as transparent as we can, make that done. So David, I don't know if you're on the call. Hi, David.
Hi, Uche, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So please go ahead from here.
All right. Thank you so much, Uche, for that. It has been an amazing session since morning and also a wonderful experience since Monday that we have kickstarted our AI Bootcamp 2023. So I would just like our participants on the call to just express how exciting they are since Monday they have been joining the program. Let me see what are the key takeaways you have learned or you have the opportunity that you have seen so far on each of the programs that we have run since Monday. Let me see your excitement. Can you drop one of the key lessons that you have learned since Monday? Today is Friday. This is day 5 of the program, as we are also looking at concluding the program tomorrow. Okay. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, right now we are going to be moving to the next section of the program, which is talking about the Mr. and Mrs. algorithm, which is one of the prestigious awards that DSN used to give during the AI Bootcamp program. As we all know, our lead mentor and founder of Data Scientist Network spoke a lot about the importance of the award and some of the modality that qualify an individual to win this award. So I would just like to quickly do a showcase of some of the past winners of this award, which is very important for us to know. So today we are going to be having the voting, and while we plan to start having the voting, there are some key things that you need to know. We have the selection to be one of the criteria. These are the past winners that you can see. The selection of the AI Bootcamp 2023 Mr. and Mrs. algorithm voting is going to be based on focus on the influence of individuals that they have within their community to support the democratization of knowledge in AI, data science, and in all our related initiatives. And this includes organizing activities like free AI in training in their campuses or cities, teaching our free AI in every city, and arranging local methods for the DSN community. it's worth to note that these are the past winners from the ladies. These are previous Miss Algorithm winner in 2019, Lawan Adiola, and she's from DSN Lautech community. And also the another past winner that we have Precious Kolawole for DSN OAU in 2020. She also won the award. And also we have Bukumi Akinremi. Also, she also won DSN OAU. She's from the community of DSN OAU. She also won the award. And from the men category, we have Rising Odegwa 2019. He won the award as well from DSN Ambrose Ali. And also we have Pelumi Okewumi, Paul Okewumi in 2020. So we have a lot of OAU that have won the award in last couple of years. We also have Oluwadosi Pajemila, who won the award in 2021. So today, we are going to be looking forward to which campus community is going to win the award. So let me just see your expression on the chat. Let me see the community that you represent on the chat. Kindly drop the name of your community on the group chat. Let me get to see who are the potential winner of the award today. All right, DSM OAU, okay, Futa, X2, all right, that's amazing. Okay, so I'll be launching the campaign in the next couple of seconds. So I will hope everybody are already anticipating and they are already waiting for this moment. Okay, I will pull up the screen in this moment. Okay. Okay. All right. So one important thing that I would like everybody to be aware of. So all the previous winners are not eligible to be nominated to contest for the second time. So we want a new winner. So that's why we are going to be having, we are not including, if you nominated a past winner on any of the nomination, we are not going to be including them in this current nomination that we have. So this, as you can see from my screen, these are the people that we have been, based on the nomination that you have made yesterday, these are the people that have shown proven capability to be nominated for the program. So you are going to be voting now, and I'm going to be launching this. So just click on you see the icon to vote from your Zoom link. So we are going to be doing this for the next, let's say, from my own time, this is 4:07. So immediately we are let's say 4:11. That's going to be 4 minutes. 4:11, we are going to stop the survey. So I'm going to launch it now while wait for people to vote. So I'm sure you're all going to be seeing the result as you are voting. Okay. All right, some people say my screen is not showing. Okay, let me just reshare. But the survey has been launched. Kindly check the survey has been launched. Kindly check your phone, or if you are using your laptop, kindly check it. I'm sure you can see it now. So we are going to stop it by, let's say, due to some people that said they couldn't see the screen before. So we are just going to be stopping immediately. That is 4. Okay, he said we should stop by 4:15. 4:15. 4:15 Nigeria time. So I think you can see the screen and you can see my time as well. So I'm going to be stopped by 4:15. All right. I'm all aware now that it is 1 minute to 15. So the vote will be closing by 1 minute's time. If you are yet to vote, kindly cast your votes. Thank you. Thank you. This is amazing. I can see the way it's all going from here. Wow. That guy. Okay. I think so we have countdown. For you. Are you sure? All right, thank you everyone for voting. Thank you for casting your nomination and also voting at the end of the day to pick the top participant for this Mr. and Miss Algorithm Award. So let me share my screen so that we can see the position of how the vote went. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so I'm sharing the result now. Here it's done. So please kindly confirm if they cannot see result now. So, all right, thank you everyone for voting. I think you can see the result now for the nominee for Miss Algorithm. So we have Amarachi from DSN Port Harcourt winning that particular. Okay, sorry. Okay, let me check. All right, no, it's not Amarachi. We have Deborah Aliyu have 26%. Okay, it's Deborah that we have there. Deborah, yeah, have the highest percentage. It's Deborah that we have that has the highest percentage. So Amarachi has 17%, Bilikisu has 17%, Deborah Aliyu has 26% votes, Pelumi Ogunremi has 12, and also Favor has 11. So we have Deborah Aliyu, DSN Futa winning the Mr. Algorithm. Also, for the nominee for Mr. Algorithm, we have Ambrose from DSN Unilad having 8%, Aramide 9%, Daniel having 2%, Evans having 7%, Frank having 6%, Miracle has 4%, Olamile Kamotosho Futa having 13%. We have Praise Olawore having 2%, Sodiq having 8%, and Victor Olufemi DSN OU having 24%. So from the nominee for Mr. Algorithm, I think the person that has the highest percentage is Victor Olufemi DSN OU. So we have our two winners of the DSN AI Bootcamp 2023 Mr. and Miss Algorithm voting. So we would like to hand over to my colleague, Uche, to take over from here So we are going to be reaching out to Victor Olufemi, DSN OAU. He has 24%, which is the overall top among the nominee for Mr. Algorithm. And also we are going to be reaching out to Deborah Ali. She has 26% among the female counterpart as well for Miss Algorithm. So thank you so much for putting your interest, and we look forward to seeing you more and more in community support and activities related. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for that quite fiercely contested voting, and I believe that we all participated, and congratulations to the winners, Mr. and Mrs. Algorithm. Thank you very much. Okay, so just a few announcements so that we can call it a day for the session today. We have a grand finale coming up tomorrow, right? The grand finale of the event. So I'm just going to go through the announcement very quickly. Number one, right? We will recall rather that our CEO and lead mentor Olubade Kombi mentioned about our global grand challenge win, right? And we have a very short video to quickly play right now for the global grand challenge that we won, just to provide a little bit more context to everyone on the call. So please sit back and just watch it, just a 2-minute video, and I'll come back after the video plays. Thank you.
Just recently put out a challenge to ask for ideas about using AI to reduce inequity. And we reached out and got 1,300 proposals, and half of those came from Africa. And my next visit back to the continent, which will be in October in Senegal, we'll have a chance to celebrate the winners of that contest that looked very, very promising.
Okay, thank you very much. So we would ask one favor from everyone on the call, both on-site and virtual participants. The video you just watched has been posted on our social media platforms, so please request every one of us to help go share, tweet, like, and repost that the posts that we've made on social media, right? The links to those posts will be dropped in the comment section, so you can please go ahead to share. We'd really appreciate that we extend the good news of our win for the Global Grand Challenge. So why not? Please go ahead, retweet, repost, like, share, as we tell the good news of what's happening at DSN and DSN AI. All right, then also, oh, thank you, Elaine. Yeah, it's just Xing, not tweeting. Thank you. Then also our annual reports that was mentioned yesterday also by our lead mentor, Olubade Kombi, is also on social media. The links will also be shared there. We expect that as a participant, why not? Go through the annual report, see what we've done over the last 12 months, and see how you can also help us extend the frontiers of our impact, right? So why not? The annual report has been shared on social media, so you can go ahead on our pages, like, download, and read through and see what we're doing. Then tomorrow, right, like I mentioned, is the grand finale. We're bringing the 2023 DSN Artificial Intelligence Bootcamp to a glorious close. And so I expect that we're all excited about what will be happening tomorrow, right? We are going to be having our speakers physical here at the center, at the AI Hub. We'll also be having media presence at the AI Hub. And there will be a lot of paparazzi, let me use that word, right? Because of course it has been an amazing 6 days of learning, interaction, collaboration, and entrenching and deepening our knowledge of artificial intelligence. So we expect all guests to be seated by 9:30, right? And if, of course, you want to make use of the green carpet, it starts by 9 a.m. So we expect all guests to be seated by 9:30, right, for the grand finale. So please, you are welcome. The link has, I believe, an email has gone into your inbox. So for an invite. So if you haven't seen it, please go ahead to check your inbox for the invite, right? And we will be glad to welcome you. All the prizes for both Mr. and Mr. Agori will also be presented tomorrow, right? So please do well to be a part of that glorious event. So once again, I want to say a very big thank you to everyone who was a part of today's session from the very beginning all the way to this moment. We truly appreciate your time, and we believe that it's been worth it. The wealth of knowledge and insights that have been shared by our distinguished speakers, I believe that you can leverage on all that has been shared to accelerate your career development, right? I want to say a very big thank you to you for being a part of the session, and we look forward to hosting you tomorrow at the grand finale of the 2023 DSN Artificial Intelligence Bootcamp. So once again, thank you, and do have an amazing evening. Bye for now.
With it. I mean, it's something I can relate with, the vision of wanting to create a hub for data scientists in West Africa. I mean, it's something that is highly needed.
Yeah, so far so good. Has been a wonderful one. I was able to learn the use of data to interpret data, to predict the future, definitely. My big take home is probably sentiment analysis and then the use of big ML.
Today we did data visualization, dealt extensively with Power BI. There's a whole lot I can do with it. Things that we've been trying to analyze, I can now visualize it, and it will make more sense to my audience.
Big ML majorly, it has been my own major takeaway, and the lectures were so broken down such that anybody can understand it.
What Sheon told me is lesser than what I even experienced the facilitators. They took us like children. It was like a dummy taking the course.
Tell everybody I come in contact with, especially young people in school right now, jobs as we know it will no longer exist. So you should get trained, in one of the technical skills, could be data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence. That is the future.
So for me, DSN, the vision, is something that every forward-looking Nigerian should identify with.